Well, thanks everybody for joining me here today for a review, our Zoom Q&A of lesson number 2, where we're going to be looking at putting together a base plan and looking at the client interview. So thank you everyone for joining me this morning. It's good to see a good crowd here. We're going to go through and we're going to review lesson number 2. And then we'll take a look at the Q&A document that we've got put up here. It doesn't look like there's any questions in there right now. And then after reviewing the assignment, we'll open it up for any questions that anybody on the call here has, and make sure everybody is comfortable moving forward with their base plan. It's a really important part of the process. So let's begin. I'll just share my screen here. There we go. And I'm hoping that everybody can see that. Let me know if you can't. All right, get my little spotlight tool. All right. So just as a heads up, I may have to just relocate from my office here. We're having our roof redone, so I'm hoping there's not a lot of hammering above my head here, but it may happen. And if that's the case, I'll just take my computer and move to another room. So just as a heads up. So let's take a look at our lesson 2. And the base map is a really important part of the design process. So it's sort of the beginning of our site analysis. And the more time and energy you put into your base map, the easier you're going to find documenting everything as we go along in the course. So the base map really is going to be a drawing that represents the existing conditions on the site. So if you were to take a snapshot overhead of your site, basically that's what you're looking at. Now, the caveat to that would be if you have a vacant piece of property as your project site, maybe you have some acreage or an urban site that doesn't have a building on it, then you'd want to locate a proposed building, wherever that may be, and you may even want to put in a proposed driveway. But other than that, we want to know just what the site looks like today, and moving forward with that. And even if you have significant plant material that you're wanting to relocate or remove, we still want to see it at this stage of your design. So again, if you go through lesson 2's discussion board, there is a lot of information on that. And again, it is the foundational layer. So it is a really important layer to get correct, and or as correct as you can. And one of the easiest ways to do that in this course is to have to use Google Earth or Google Map and begin with that as a template to get your rough property lines in place and any other site elements. So let's take a look at some of the elements that we're asking for. So it's important when we're putting together any design sheet that we want to have your title block filled in. And that title block is going to have the project name, the site, your name, the address, and the location. And if for some reason you want to keep that private, that's completely fine. You don't have to put that on your template, but just please drop me a note with the address, because there is often a case during the course where I'll want to visit your site on Google Earth, and more often than not, it will be in lesson 5 when we look at water. But that gives me the ability to do that fairly easily. And if it's on each design sheet that you produce, that's great. We also want to have your date, north arrow, scale bar is a nice thing to include as well. And then, of course, all the structures. And we also want to know where the ridges or the top of the roof is. So where those peaks are and where the water falls. That's going to be really helpful when we get to lesson 5, because we're going to be looking at how much water is coming off of those roofs and whereabouts that water is going to. So you'll have different downspouts identified at that time. We're also going to look at roads and pathways, and this is a really important piece that often gets minimized when someone's putting a base plan together, is the underground utilities. And that can be vital to know, especially if we're going to be creating anything like a rain garden or anything that's subsurface that might interfere or conflict with that. So this will take a lot of those potential headaches away. And we're looking at overhead utilities. This is also a good time to look at contour lines where, getting some contour line information and placing that on your base plan is a great way to start. When we do acreage designs, we often have a drone survey done, and so we're starting with high definition images, and we get contour information with that. And that's really vital to know how water is going to behave on your site, amongst other things, right? So we're also looking at fences or property boundaries, any water that's going through the site, any spigots that are on the outside of the dwelling or perhaps elsewhere, your well if you're on a well, any existing significant vegetation. So when we are looking at this with our design work, we're looking at trees and shrubs. I don't often document on paper herbaceous or perennial plants, but I would make a list of them. A legend is important so that we know what we're looking at in terms of the symbols that are on your drawing. And again, the property boundaries, and some properties may have some easements or some right-of-ways or setbacks, and that is also really important information to know, and any other features. So for ourselves, for my wife Angela and myself, when we put together base plans, this is a part of what we do, but one thing we also check out is the property zoning. Now, you're not needing to do that in this case, but the zoning does play into what is allowable. And that could be, for instance, just the fence height. As you go through your design, if you decided, I want to put a 6-foot fence along the front, if you were doing that in, say, the city of Nanaimo, you wouldn't be allowed to, because that's limited to, I think it's 4 foot or 4.5 feet along that boundary. So again, zoning has a lot of, plays a key role in land design. So you want to make sure that you're complying with whatever rules and regulations are out there. All right, so that is the base map. And if we take a look at the rubric on that, and that's an important item to reference, you will see that the base map has 10 points allocated to it. and the client interview also. So they're both, in this case, equally important. And let's just take a look at an example of previous students' base map. So this person has a couple base maps here. And ultimately we want to use one, but in this case, they put together a couple. So we have a legend here on the left, which is really helpful. Now, I personally never use legends, but that's because I'm labeling the elements individually with what's called callouts or labels. But in this course, probably going with legends is a really good idea just to make things simpler, but you know, that is completely fine either way. Again, we have our little title block at the bottom, and that is really important to repeat in every single design layer that you do. And again, that gives me the info I need to access it through Google Earth and all these other pertinent bits of info. But you can see here that this is a pretty simple base map, and it shows a driveway, a residence, another building here, and there is, let me see here, I believe there's a swale already in place, some existing trees, and this is a whole mixed forest here. So if your site is really just has portions of it that are, you know, wooded, and instead of putting every individual tree on the map, you can certainly do this type of thing where you would draw the outline and fill the middle of it and then make a reference to that here. Okay, here's some garden beds. There's a pond in place, and you'll notice there's fence and property boundary, but there is not any utilities, and that's what they did on the next map here, where it has some color and you're being shown where the municipal water comes in, where the electric is underground, as well as some septic. And there is a protected water course. So in this part of the world where I live, you would not be allowed to do anything within 15 meters of this. So if we drew 15-meter line out, you can pretty much remove anything here from your design, right? Unless it was enhancing that waterway with native plant material. So that's one of the, that's a good thing to know. So in your case, if you were on a little bit of acreage and you had water running through your property, you would want to find out what bylaws or regulations apply to that, whether you're able to work up to it and at what point they want that water course protected. So it's pretty much different everywhere you go. So again, in British Columbia here, standard is 15 meters. And then there's a key here for the house and garage and all these other, they have an RV pad, etc., and a greenhouse. So this is well laid out, and in a perfect world, we want these combined, right? So that, I don't think that would have been too hard in this case to have those utilities built into this. And then we go to some contour information, and this person was able to find 2-meter contours and place those within the drawing by taking a screenshot. And this looks like it's from a website called Contour Creator. And that we will probably be referencing more in lesson 5 when we really need to know the lay of the land on the project site itself and in the surrounding areas. And we can explore that a little bit more in later weeks. But if you Google Contour Creator, you'll see If we have time today, well, maybe I'll do that right now. That might be helpful for many of you. Let's see here. Oops, got to spell it right. There we go. So this is the interface you'll get, and it might be a little bit daunting, but it's fairly simple. So I'm just gonna head to the area I live, and I'm gonna change the resolution here. And okay. Okay, so I will go right here. So let's say this was your project site. What you do is you first go down here to plot options, and you want to put intervals, and you probably want to have those in feet. And for many of you on an urban site, you'd want 1 foot intervals. And when you get into larger properties, you'd have to play with this number a bit. And that'll become obvious when we go forward why that is the case. But once you've done that, all you do is you click in the upper and lower area, and then a box is formed, and you can adjust that wherever you want. And then what you do is you hit the Get Data button there, and boom, you have your 1 foot contours. Now, if we zoom in here, it's not going to cooperate too much here. There we go. That's pretty good. You can see that if you were to overlay this in your map, it might be a little bit busy, right? It might be hard. So I can change that to 2 and just ask it to redraw it, and that's a little better for this initial base plan. So you could basically take a screenshot of this and use that within your base plan. You could also trace these individually onto your base plan. There's a couple of different ways of doing it. Now, what I will say is this software is incredibly inaccurate in that you do not want to utilize this for professional purposes. For this course, it's great. It's a very easy, pretty accurate way of getting contour information. But again, if you were doing this, if this was a project site, I would be using other methods to get contour data, and that might include a drone survey. That might include, you know, I use QGIS, which is a software I can bring in LiDAR data, satellite data, and create contour information from that. So there's many ways of getting it, but this is a quick and easy way of doing it for the course. Let me just go back to yes, and there was some notes here. So that sort of concludes the example on this student example here. And just as a reminder, let's go to the course. Just as a reminder, if once you log in, if you go to modules, you will scroll down here, and this may look a little different for yourself, but under resources, you'll see sample student reports, and there's 4 samples there. So those are always really interesting to look at, and they may be very helpful for you as you're going through this and you want an idea of, you know, what something might look like. So these are pretty good examples here. But let's go back to lesson 2 discussion board. And that sort of wraps up the base plan. Let's look at the client survey. I'll just have a quick sip here. Now, we give sort of equal importance to the client survey And the main reason for that is it's, really, it's pretty hard to design a site if you don't have good, clear information from your client. When I look back at the early years of designing, 25 plus years ago in the location that we're at, we did not perhaps dig deeply enough into this part of the design process. And that can lead to some challenges later on. You may you may have in your mind that, oh my gosh, this site is just perfect to have a greenhouse situated on it. And if the client is not in alignment with that, you may find that you add elements to your initial design that are not in keeping with your client. So what ends up happening is you have to go back and make changes, which is often the case anyways, but it's an unnecessary thing if you've, in the first go around, you have a good handle on that. So let's just take a look at the master document here, and we'll go to the client survey. Again, there's the base map information here that we've already gone through. And one thing I should mention is if you look at the template file and you look at some student examples, there may be little changes that you find confusing. What you want to do is always reference, the template file is always the one to lean towards, because some of the examples that are posted there are from previous classes, and this template file tends to get modified. Probably every class, it gets a little bit of a tweak, an improvement. So here is the first page of the interview. And really what we want to know, again, is some general information about people here, your client. And, these are all really important in that, how much, here's some of the highlights. How much time do they have to put into this? How much time do they have to maintain what you're proposing? Initial budget, which is very, very hard for most people to determine, but that is really important because you can design the Taj Mahal for somebody, and if they don't have the resources for it, then the design's really not good value for them. So that is a tough one to work through. And, even with ourselves, it's still a little mysterious for people. But having a rough guideline can help, because a $10,000 landscape and a $100,000 landscape, are quite different in what you can do with them. Here is a client interview set up for multiple clients. So if you have a number, a couple, you might want to use this. And then this is a very important part too, where we have a site inventory and we're looking at all of the existing elements and going through these with the client and getting a good handle on potentially what they want. So they may have, say on acreage, they might have a beautiful producing well, but they want to have rainwater harvesting. That would be an example. So in electricity, perhaps they don't have solar, but want that. Lighting is an important part, but probably not the most important. These elements at the top here are, and even cooking. So we are this summer and fall, we're building an off-grid outdoor kitchen for ourselves, just in case we find ourselves without power. And, our kitchen's dependent on electricity, but we still want the ability to cook food if that is the case in the future, and certainly is in the winter when we get outages. And then we go to the next page here where we have, again, the inventory, what's on the site and what's desired. And then some really important sheets here where we're looking at what the client likes most about the site. That can be a very important thing to know, and what they don't like about the site. And those are both really important bits of information. And then there's top concerns and goals. And this is a really good one to try and extract from your client, is the overall vision. In a perfect world, what do they see? And that, for us, our client interview process, even though it's a little bit different than this, it's basically the template that we use as we're moving forward. It's very, very helpful to reference, because sometimes our designs will take a number of months, and from an initial discussion to when you're creating it, there has been some time go by, and we're often doing multiple designs at once. So this is a great way of acquiring that information and keeping it in one place. So that is the template file on client survey. There's a little blurb here. There are some assignment resources on every discussion board. You're going to have these different tabs, and the resources, how to make a scale bar, some of the introduction into base map creation. If you're doing it by hand, which is completely fine, no problem with that. Or if you're doing it with computers, that's great. Whatever works best for you. That is what I would recommend. Ultimately, CAD or computer-aided drawing has a lot of advantages, but it also has a lot of cost and training involved with it. So if you're planning to do this beyond the course for others, that's something you might work towards, but try and pick your method that's going to be as simple as possible for you going forward here. So you're able to really focus on the design process and not get too hung up on learning new software, okay? And then there are some more resources here, as you can see. So there's lots of different tutorial videos that have been placed on this page, and there's a nice link here to those sample reports. So each discussion board, we're working hard to try and place all the info you need on one page, so you can just always reference that discussion board and find anything you need, including the template file. Yeah, so let me just take a look. It looks like we don't have any. Oops, I think that's the wrong. No. I didn't update that. So that is summer. Okay, so I am just going to stop sharing for the moment and ask any of you whether you have any questions about what we've talked about here, whether it be the base plan or the client survey. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask away if you have any questions right now.
I had a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Tim.
So when you're doing that contour program, how do you know you're aligned up with your actual property?
Well, that's a good question. Now you mean the contour creator site I showed you?
Yeah, if you're just taking a screen capture, I mean, how do you actually align that with your actual property?
Well, let's, I'll flip back over to that as I'm answering your question here. So if we had our contour creator, and let's say we take a screenshot of this area, that would almost be the template of your base plan, where you were starting to, let's say you were tracing in your driveway, your house, some of these significant tree elements, then the contours are going to match up with that. Does that make sense?
I think so, but it looks like to me, if you're just taking, I guess if you're just taking the actual screen capture, how do you know the dimensions actually line up with? I guess what I'm saying is, like, there's an overlay of the contours.
Mm-hmm.
How does that actually match the property if you're just doing a screen capture? If you can kind of manipulate the square that you've created that's in the contours, how does that actually match up with their property itself?
Well, you'd want to have a scale reference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe Contour Creator provides a scale to it. Now, when you're capturing from Google Earth, it does. But in the absence of that, if I was taking a screen capture here and I wanted a scale, all I'd have to do is measure a fixed element that's on the screen here. So maybe that's the width of the road. That might be, even the length of this car, the length of the roof line, and then you would have you'd have a scale that you could apply to that. Now, I don't know if this is where you're going, but we don't have a property boundary in place. And that's really going to have to be a best estimate on your part for this course or for this exercise. But normally you'd want to have that as close as you can get it. Especially if you're looking at any perimeter plantings or screening. And with ourselves, often one of the starting points is a survey with a plot plan with the building footprint included. Let me try and find one for you here as we're going. Is that answer your question, Tim? Or
Yeah, I think so. Because it actually makes more sense, and it's easier than when I was trying to explain, because the contours themselves are already related to the property that exists.
yes,
But it seems like when you're cutting and pasting, you're screwing all that up, because you're taking a snapshot from something that's already there and you're trying to align it to something else.
I think I know where you're going with this. So if you were starting your base plan, this would be your starting point. So you're not having to overlay it onto anything else. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because yes, if you need to do that, then you'd have to scale one image to another. And that gets a little bit tricky with the Google software, the Google Slide software. Yeah, let me try and find a plot plan here for you. I got a few, but I have not got one set up to show you today. But the contour information is definitely an important piece, and it won't seem that way until we get to lesson 5. And then we're going to want to know, where basically the contours of the land and how water is going to flow and move on that. I might have to, yeah, I'll just open up here another software. So yeah, in some ways, Tim, I know that you currently are a design build contractor. Is that correct?
Right.
So for you that you're doing this kind of stuff already, I'm sure that you would be starting with much more accurate information. And that could be a building footprint or a plot plan. I'm just looking for one here on an old project that I've got here. Uh-huh. Sorry, I'm just trying to locate. I'm not having any success at the moment. Nothing like looking at an old drawing I haven't visited for a while here. I'll try something else. Okay, I know I've got that. Oh, this is an interesting one. Maybe not. Yeah, I'm just looking really for a legal, which I'm surprised I'm having a hard time finding. There we go. All right. So I'll just share that. So this is a survey that we got for a project. And in this particular case, so this came from a surveyor, and here is the property boundary shown in green. There's some elements that are shown here: existing building, existing trees, a pathway, and these are contours, and I believe these are 1 foot contours. They should be, even though this is the rest of it's in metric. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And then the house, a decking, the stairs, and then typically get set back the corner of the house set back from the property line, and that would be in meters. And in this case, we were, excuse me, in this case, we were just working on this part of the property, which is a waterfront area that they wanted to create a retaining wall down at the base here and have a little bit of a seating area. And we had to submit for what's called a development permit with the city of Nanaimo. So we needed all this information from a starting point. So if you get something like this, I mean, this is a fantastic place to start. You also notice that they've numbered the trees and what they are and the diameter. So that's super helpful as well. And with our software, this was a PDF, but we also got what's called a DWG file. So we could just import it. So all of this got imported. We didn't have to do any tracing, which is nice. But again, if you were tracing this, you would then have to take a look at the scale. And in this case, there's no scale bar, but there is a scale of 1/16 equals a foot. So you'd have to, and then of course there's some notes here. So yes, contours were at 1 foot intervals. I was we had requested. So that's one example. There are many. Like I say, on acreage, more often than not, we will get a drone survey and import that. And that's a fun process because you get both topographic and less than perfect legal boundaries with that, but it's still quite good. Let me see if I have something I can show you here. No, I'm having problems finding things this morning, so we won't worry about that. Yeah, so hopefully that helped to answer your question, Tim. Can I ask you a question? Do you use do you do most of your drawings by hand, or are you using any software to help you out?
No, I do just do everything by hand. And actually, I've been predominantly working for other companies.
Right.
So they do pretty much a lot of the designs. I actually had a small landscape company when I first got started, and I literally just kind of sketched things out. So I was really informal. Lately, like I said, I work on my own, and I just kind of do really informal drawings. So I don't really get into a lot of computer design. But that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm taking the course, because I want to dive into this a little bit deeper. So
right. Yeah, well, that's super interesting. When we first started our business, you know, that is very much how we operated. It was very rough concepts, and we would do all the details and finishing work on site. And now it's, you know, very different than that. It's more detailing everything out on paper, and then it allows us to, you know, easily price that. And that's a big part of that, is being able to attach a number to somebody's project rather than, you know, it being a per hour plus material arrangement. So yeah, it's a great journey to go down. There's a big learning curve with any software. So good for you for you know, keeping it simple at this point. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you may find that you want to add more detail, and there's no doubt some of the computer softwares do really help you on that. We're very lucky I've been using the same software for 25 years, and I was super lucky to have found it, you know, decades ago, and it turned out that it has evolved into a wonderful product. It's expensive, but you know, we do enough work to justify it at the moment, and we get a sort of an update, a new version every year, and you know, a little bit of learning on the new versions each year, but it's not too bad. But the initial learning curves, for instance, for Vectorworks Landmark, that's what we use, probably takes you about a year to get to know it.
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it takes a while. It does. And then you get a, you know, a really good feel for what you can do, and everybody does something a little bit different and graphically, because you'll probably all find that the design process is you could split it into two different stages. You have, you know, the ideas in your head that come from, you know, many different steps in the design process, from the site analysis and the client interview to, you know, it's just a progression through that. But it's the other side of the coin is articulating it into a drawing that is understandable. So I find that these softwares just allow for better visualization and better understanding. So that's the only difference between a really rough hand-drawn and say a really elaborate, rendered drawing. It's just the visualization part of it. So yeah, so that's about it with that. Yeah, and we'll certainly be doing more in the way of discovery, Tim, as we go through the course. And I'll make a point of putting out some examples of what we've done. And I was very, very lucky during part of my career, about 15 years ago. Our initial company that we created, it was right around 2008 when there was a crash in the economy, and we were quite vulnerable as we were trying to grow at that time, and our company failed. And it was quite a shock, but it was a blessing in disguise, because I ended up working for a large landscape firm in my area here, and I was I was the estimator and project manager for commercial work. So I got to see probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 landscape architects' drawings each week, and we would decide which ones we would bid on. And that whole process of just seeing masses of drawings over the 2.5 years I worked for that company um, really helped me figure out, what details are important on a project to include in a drawing. And so learning from others is is a great way to do it, and seeing what other people do. It's quite amazing what some folks can do. Um, and recently, the last few years, I've been getting into farm design and much larger scale. And that requires a completely different process and really emphasizes heavy on the mapping end, which is great. That's why I use a program called QGIS, and you can basically access free LiDAR data and create some pretty incredible maps from it and analyze a site just using digital terrain models. So it's pretty exciting. And but that's just the net outcome of learning this design protocol. And you'll probably find, for those who are in the course, such as Tim, who are doing this professionally or want to do this professionally, is this will be a great template. This course is a great template to start with, and you'll basically modify what you do to work with your business or what you want to provide. I guess an example of that is the template file that you're using. It ends up being quite a large document, and that's nothing like what we provide our clients. It's much more condensed. But again, this is a great step in the right direction in terms of seeing what potentially you could include, and really getting a good handle on the permaculture design process. So it's a good starting point, and it never ends. So I've been in this business a long time, and I'm constantly learning, and that's a thrilling part of it. Yeah, so I should stop rambling and see if anybody has any other questions that they would like answered today. Have I finished up answering your questions, Tim, to your satisfaction? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to see your vector program and some of the examples you've done, because I'm actually curious what level of complexity your program has that we're not working on right now. Like what specific elements in your program in terms of detail do you have that you guys deliver to your clients versus some of the just crude stuff that we're doing?
Sure. Sure. Well, it'd be tough to pull up some of that right now, but I can tell you that one of the things we do with, say, all the contour data that we would accumulate for a site is we create a 3D site model. And that site model allows us to visualize the site. We can add elements to it. We can add structures and landscape elements. So you can basically, travel around the landscape and see what your proposed design elements are going to look like. To some degree, it's a little cruder than real life, but you can take it to pretty extreme levels. There's another software called Twinmotion, which is a rendering software. So this is often the case. You don't end up using just one piece of software. You have many tools in the toolbox, and Twinmotion is a rendering software where you can take 3D work that you've done in, say, Vectorworks and import it into Twinmotion, and then give it, add it a bit of life to it so that it's just a more detailed render that you produce. But again, it's time, and there's some time associated with that, and it's not appropriate for every project, but for some, it could be, right?
Okay, great.
Yeah, no, it's always fun to share stuff. So I'm all about doing that. So no worries there.
I have a I have a question.
Sure.
I am designing a site on a college campus. So there's no property boundary really, because the property boundary is the college campus, but the
Sure.
site is within that. And I also, when I set up just the site, I didn't include all the buildings in the parking lot and stuff, but it sounds like now with the base map, that's more important to include all that. So do I need to go back and change what I did on the initial site, or
Well, let me just take a
as
look.
I move forward, add that to the base map? Or
Yeah, the one. Let me just
I'm having a challenge defining my boundary, I guess, is the
I totally get it. It's a good question. Let me just see if I can find your.
I don't think I've shared it with you yet, because I was out. I was gone for 2 weeks when the class started. So I just finished the first assignment. So
Okay.
I actually am getting ready to share it this morning.
Okay.
But I can share my screen if you want, so I can show you what the site looks like, if that is helpful.
Sure. Or do you have a link to your document?
Sure.
Because you could put that in the chat.
Okay, let me see if I can figure that out real quick.
So it'd probably be easier than me trying to share screen.
Here. So I haven't gone through to look at what. I'll see if this works. I don't know if this, let me open the document.
There should be a little share button in the top right corner of the Google Doc.
Yes.
And you just have to make sure there's permission for others to view it. So if you click on that button, it's probably private to yourself.
Oh yeah, I see restricted.
And then you just change it to allow others to view. And then there'll be a link you can copy.
Whoops, I don't see a link. Let me go back to that. Oh, here's the copy link. Okay. All right. I'm attempting this. I am not familiar at all with Google Sheets. That has been probably my biggest challenge, is just that I don't ever work in Google. Documents are, so that's been a little bit, the whole thing has been a little challenging.
Well, I get it. It's, the more you do work with it, it's pretty amazing. We use it quite a bit. Oh, there you go. I see your.
I think that,
right.
Yeah, once I get the hang of it, it's not been, but there was a bit of a learning curve just because I'm used to doing everything in PowerPoint or Canvas and stuff that's just more challenging.
There we go. So you did a great job there. let us take a look at your. So that is your project site boundary, what we're seeing here, is that correct? The red-
Yes, that was my project site boundary. But then after what you were talking about, I was thinking, oh, maybe I need to include the buildings. And if you go, I have a bigger view of the entire campus. I think I included that. Oh no, I thought I had a bigger view of the campus itself. Oh, maybe I weeded that out because it was hard to choose which ones to put in there.
Oh, sure. Well, you got some good photos here. Yeah, if I understand what you're trying to do here. Now, the advantage of including a little bit more is when we get to looking at water, you have all these impervious surfaces, which to a gardener's eye are evil, right? But from a rainwater harvesting perspective, they're fantastic. So yeah, I might agree that increasing the scope or even just squaring this off here would include these buildings and a little bit of the parking.
Those are all greenhouses. The majority
Yeah.
of them are. The only one that's an actual building is the one that's closest to the parking lot there.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, you can gutter greenhouses too, so they're still a valued impervious surface that you can use.
Right.
But the one thing that is fantastic about the permaculture design process is it's really a holistic approach. So we want to look at the whole, and by doing so, we're able to look at all of these assets that we might be able to incorporate. So even with your project here, you're probably wanting to really focus on the soft landscape, the trees, the shrubs, the soils. If we're also factoring in some of these assets that are outside of that, that will no doubt improve your design and improve the ability of the landscape to support itself. So I would encourage you to, if you want, I wouldn't say in this part of your assignment you need to worry about it, but when you go to work on your base plan, you may want to just expand that line out a bit. And I would even suggest zooming back out a little bit for that image. Now, one thing I'll throw out here to everybody on the call, and I can see here you're not north up, just judging by this line here. So what you want to try and do, even though it might not visually agree with your senses, is to have north at the upper portion of the page. And that's a pretty firm standard in the landscape industry, even in the Southern Hemisphere. So there's.
Yeah, I know that. I just could not figure out how to get my image that way once.
Okay. Well,
in Google Earth, I could not figure out
I can show
how
you
to
that.
manipulate it to where it would come out that way.
I can show you. It doesn't look like you're on Google Earth Pro. You're on the web-based version there, right?
I can't download the Google Earth Pro onto my work computer, and I have terrible internet at home, so it really slows that down. So I'm going to have to figure out some way of actually getting access to that.
Well, let me just, I am going to share Google Earth Pro, and I will just show you a quick tip here on that. Yeah, we'll just go to this site. All right. So as I'm sure you're aware, when you're moving around in Google Earth, there's all sorts of things going on with the perspective view, right? You can see you're at an angle here. and you know, perhaps you're over here, and then it gets quite confusing to try and align. You know, in some ways I like this angle for this site, but what the easiest thing to do in Google Earth Pro is, if you get pretty close to where you want to be, you hit the U key, and that takes you directly to a 2D overhead view. And that's when you're taking a screenshot, that's what you want to do. You want to be directly overhead, and that way any scaling is accurate, whether it be at the top or the bottom of the image. If we're in a perspective view, then that's all going to change. The other thing is, when we're here, if I touch the N key, so N is in nickel, it will automatically orientate me north up. And that is where I would want to be to take my,
Oh, okay, that,
yeah.
yeah,
So
I
the
couldn't figure
U,
out how to make it do that. It kept wanting
yeah.
to adjust.
Now, I don't think it'll do it on the web base, but it will in Google Earth Pro. And Google Earth Pro, I understand if you've got some challenges with your home internet, but it is a much better system, and very, very powerful, and free. So that's
Oh,
great.
I'm impressed with it. I've got to figure out how to get it, get
Yeah.
it to where I can use it.
Well, you know what, it you know, not related to your question here, but one thing that's wonderful about it is, like, we can do work at our end in our office and send our you know, send our client here a Google Earth KML file, so they can just have a look at what we've done. And here is our contour map. It's a great way of sharing information, and we don't want to have that. So in this case, I can send them this, and they have this contour data, right? So it's a wonderful software. I don't like designing on it. I would not do that. But for sharing information on and visualizing, it's wonderful. So if you just remember the U key and the N key, you're off to the races with that. Hopefully that helps you out.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. But your site looks really interesting, and certainly I've had many clients that have used public areas for their project site. Another thing that is an advantage in including these buildings is you know, you really need to have a center of human interaction. And as we go through the design process, that'll become obvious, and those buildings are going to allow for that. Otherwise, you'd have to put in a proposed structure, but you have it already. So does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, so we're at 10 after, we're a little bit late, but if anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to answer that. So please feel free to go ahead. I want you guys to feel comfortable moving forward with this.
Hi, this is Janine, and just a quick question. When you talk about having a drone survey, is that something that you guys do, or is it something that you hire somebody to come in and do it for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. We hire that out. In Canada, you have to have a certain level of pilot's license to operate a drone. They did that a few years ago, and that pretty much cut out any amateurs ability to take surveys. They don't want drones up in the air if they don't have some bigger picture of aviation rules and regulations. So we hire that out when we have it done. It really depends on the project, because I really prefer importing LiDAR data in a lot of ways. And we will even do that for urban sites if we want contour data for that. But that's a trickier process. You have to know how to take that and convert it. So whereas the drone survey, you get everything you need right out of the gate. And it's not that expensive, you know, for where I live to get, say, a 5 to 50 acre site documented, you know, it's be around $1,000. And that's with the high definition images that are all stitched together to have one high definition map. And then it's such, you know, it's very high definition, and you can use that to create your base plan, provided there isn't a lot of you know, provided the property isn't heavily treed. So if that's the case, the drone surveys don't like trees. They don't read the ground very easily, because ones that we hire out are not LiDAR based. They're photogrammetry based, and they have to see the ground in order to get the info. But yes, long answer. Yeah, we hire it out.
No, that's great. And I can see where LiDAR would be superior, especially with a lot of vegetation like that.
Yeah, so you can just basically take the vegetation out with LiDAR. It's quite incredible. The only caveat with that is if there has been disturbances on the site since the satellite data was collected. So where I live, there's and you know, probably the west coast of the United States is the same, where there's a portal, you know, a free portal where you can go access the data, and it'll have the date where it was acquired. And then you can determine whether there's been disturbances on the site since then that would make, you know, the data suspect. Does that make sense? So that's where the drone survey comes in. It is, you know, on that day, a representation of the site in terms of the images and the contour data.
Got it.
Yeah.
Can you post a link to that LiDAR portal?
I can for British Columbia. That might not help you.
I can probably trace back from there to somebody who will have my location, maybe.
Yeah, we're let's see, where are you here? You're in
Modoc
California.
County, California.
Okay, so if you just let me just Google
and I'm in a
there
bit
you
of
go.
a hinterland, so it's challenging getting information that applies to the back end of nowhere.
All right, here, I'll just share my screen for a minute. So I just typed in LiDAR portal California, and here is a data set from 2017.
Oh, perfect.
And then you'd have to dive in. If I go to British Columbia here, there's one for our province, and it is quite lovely in that it has a GIS map here, and you just kind of zoom in to where you want to extract the information. And being British Columbia, we have so much forest, and you can see that not all of the areas have been covered, but they've done a good job of covering off where there's a lot of habitat So yeah, if I was looking here, I would just click on this map and download that link, and it's an LAZ file, and then sort of go from there. And it says it's 2019, and it tells me it's a density of 8 points per square meter. So it's all kind of boring stuff, but it tells me how the resolution and what I could do with that. All right, so we
No, that's wonderful. Thank you.
yeah, no problem. And then you have to learn QGIS, which is not an intuitive program, but it's very interesting. Yeah. So is there any other questions for the day? If not, we'll wrap it up and everybody can get on with their day.
A quick comment and a quick question.
Sure.
So the lady that was talking before this last one, I was stuck using the regular Google Earth 2, and they do have a quick button on the compass. So if you just push the compass, I think it's in the bottom right hand corner. It'll create a north aspect.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for that, Tim. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so also I was stuck with that too, and I think I told you I'm going to probably redo my whole lesson 1 once I get my laptop because it just turned out so crappy.
I see. Yeah, well, I totally get it. If you're being constrained by technology, it usually makes it easier, but not always. Hey, so
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks for letting me know that.
I just had one more quick question. This is probably a stupid one, but when you're trying to get your client survey, what's the best way to export the questions? I know you kind of blank out all of the information, and then what do? Just do a screen capture and then send them in as a different file, or what's the best way to do that?
Well, we use Google Drive quite a bit, and I'll show you what we do. There we go. Just share the screen here. So we have created a questionnaire on Google Drive, right? So not on Google Sheets. It's on the, I'm not sure what they call this, Google Doc. And it's just like a regular Word doc. And this is our master, right? And what we do is when somebody calls, and we have a certain process in our initial client contact, and we have what's called a good fit call, where we schedule a phone appointment, and before our phone appointment, we will have them fill in this questionnaire. So it's 3 or 4 pages, and they fill it in to the best of their ability. And when we want to send them this, we just make a copy, and then I usually put their name at the beginning, and then I make that copy. And then once that's created, I just share that link up here, and I will just make it so they can edit that. And then I copy the link and send it to them. And they fill it in, and I can view it online. And basically I pull this up when we have our call. So pretty simple.
That's great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. All right. So I am going to stop share. And if that's it for today, we'll end the call, and wish you all a great week, and we'll hopefully see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, well, you take care.